I mean, on the highway, they're really going fast. They're tailgating one another. And in the cities, it's like people crossing and everybody honking at each other. And somehow I have not seen any accidents.
None of us will be driving our cars soon anyway, because of today's headline topic, which is AI doom.
The best investors are those that go to where things are heading, not to where they've been.
One of the serious downsides is this is going to drive a much bigger chasm between the haves and the have-nots.
I'm calling this an existential problem because drugs exist in order to numb, to take away fear of there being no ground and nobody telling you what you ought to do with your life.
Well, we've been set free by this AI revolution as opposed to being like suppressed by it. For an advertising-free version of the show, check out patreon.com/Wall Street Wildlife. On this week's Wall Street Wildlife with Krzysztof and Luke, what does the rise of AI mean for the future of society, and how can investors prepare for it? Also, why I sold Remitly just a few months after buying it. Krzysztof has added to his EOS Energy position. He's going to explain why. He also goes on safari with a tech-first insurance platform, and I've got my first ever safari short. I bought puts on a quantum computing shitco.
It's a shitco unless it goes up. While you're holding a put. Then it actually makes it 3 times a shitco.
You chickened out. We'll get to that at the back of the episode because you chickened out of your short, and I've jumped in to the void that you left.
Right?
I hate
yeah,
this sector.
It's a team effort sometimes to bring down these fraudulent quantum computer companies. Badger, you're alive and well, which is something I worry about anytime you hop on a motorcycle. Where were you, and why are you still alive?
Yeah, well, I was nearby. I was in Sardinia. Saw the whole of Sardinia on the back of more than one motorcycle because I rented a Harley Davidson and it weren't for me. It was a bag of shit. Sorry if you're a Harley fan. Yeah, I want my bikes with gadgets like Tesla style. And I finished the trip on a Ducati Multistrada, which was much more fun and much more my speed. But I wasn't so far away. You're still in Sicily. I was in Sardinia. Are they near each other?
Yeah. Stone's throw away. More importantly, can you teach me how to ride a motorbike? Because here in Sicily, some of my Sicilian adventures, one snapshot of it, I found myself in one of those tiny little Italian cars that's no bigger than a cardboard box with a cracked windshield going backwards down an extraordinarily steep hill. And the sides in some of these Sicilian streets leave exactly no more than 10 millimeters on each side to get through. So, getting any kind of American sized car is completely out of the question. And my uncle actually suggested, why not get a motorbike? But it's tricky business, right? If you don't know what you're doing, and I'm liable to kill myself or my wife, right, without proper instruction. So will you teach me?
Yeah, sure. I used to actually be a motorcycle instructor. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that. That's why I'm asking you.
Sure thing. Next time I come to Austin, I'll give you a lesson. We'll rent some bikes.
Okay.
Hey, listeners. My name is Brett Schaefer, one of the hosts of the Chit Chat Stocks podcast. On our show, we do comprehensive stock research reports, interview analysts, and learn from great investors. And we have coverage on stocks like Airbnb, Nubank, Mercado Libre, and many others. Plus, we cover all the hot financial news on our weekly investing power hours. We have episodes for all types of investors, and think if you listen to this podcast, you will enjoy ours as well. Follow the Chit Chat Stocks podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and start discovering new investments today.
So, any highlights? Any highlights from the trip?
Yeah, I mean, it was just superb. We saw the whole of Sardinia. It is an incredibly beautiful country, some great roads, some great food. Our friend who was organizing the trip, we got to meet her mama and papa, and they hosted us for like a really fancy dinner. Yeah, really, really great. And I rushed back to London a day before everybody else because I had to attend a wedding of a friend. So the wedding was super fun, but I missed like the final night of the trip.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. How long are you in Sicily for? You're heading to Poland soon, right?
Yeah, we were actually in a small town Sicilian village called Leonforte for a very strange academic conference in the middle of nowhere, but really beautiful and kind people and lots of Sicilian donkeys, paths made for Sicilian donkeys. It's just wow, the thing about, I mean, maybe since I'm from the States, history hits me a little harder being on the old continent. But then when you go into this tiny little enclave where you could see the Roman ruins and the Greek ruins, and it's just part of the town, it's just, to me, breathtaking and real change of perspective. This seeing the years, the centuries, just right there. So somehow motoring around on a Vespa or motorcycle kind of seems more in tune with the place than something like a protected car. You could feel the wind in your ears a little better. So I'm generally considering, doing a Vespa / motorcycle kind of way of going about. If there's enough ways, I suppose, to hold all the luggage and the stuff you would need to go, and you're an expert in that, right? It's possible.
It certainly is, yeah. And it's definitely a much more fun way of seeing a country. Like, you're a runner, right? It's a great way to see a city, just running a city. And like a great way to see a country, I feel in the same way, is like on two wheels, either a bicycle or a motorbike, rather than being like in a glass box, which is your car.
Yeah. One other thing to point out, though, about driving here, there's a paradox I've noticed. In Italy, they drive like maniacs. I mean, on the highway, I mean, they're really going fast. They're tailgating one another. And in the cities, it's like people crossing and everybody honking at each other. And somehow I have not seen any accidents. Like, it's like everybody seems to be more, I don't know, like still paying attention, versus in the US, everyone's on their gadgets and crashing into each other. So I don't know if there's something like somehow less dangerous by being on vehicles and driving in a more dangerous way. I don't know if you could speak to that at all.
I mean, certainly Americans are terrible drivers. But we saw our fair share of crashes in Sardinia, not ourselves, other vehicles. So I don't know. I think it happens everywhere. The British are the best drivers in the world, though. That's undoubted.
Suspect.
Anyway, it's going to be irrelevant because none of us will be driving our cars soon anyway, because of one of the impacts of today's headline topic, which is AI doom.
So I was listening to the All In podcast and hearing their takes on AI is, the doom and gloom scenario. And it occurred to me that this is one of those tremendously rare moments in humanity that just doesn't come along very often. And a fancy word for that is a paradigm shift. And I began thinking, just deep down, I felt like this is the perfect moment for a little philosophizing, because in a sense, philosophy is the queen of all sciences. Philosophy is what helps you understand the framework you're using to understand the thing that you're actually employing as a tool, right? And from an investing standpoint, Luke, tell me if this sounds right to you. In many ways, the best investors are those that go to where things are heading, not to where they've been. And those who kind of reframe their understanding of things ahead of time have a better shot at, in a sense, going to where that puck is going. And so one of the things that really perked my ears about the all-in guys is in that debate is that they are working from what I call a technological understanding of things, but they can't see outside of that particular frame. That's what's so hard about philosophy, is that a certain kind of way of being we just take as natural. And I think there's something extraordinary that's starting to happen in this moment. So let me kind of spell this out a little bit. Mini historical lesson here. This is what I mean by it's kind of like fish swimming in water, and it's kind of hard to understand the nature, the ground of being. So at first, so I'm drawing here on the philosopher Heidegger. His main question to people is, what is being? And the problem is we've forgotten to even ask that question. Okay, the Greeks thought of things in a particular way. To the Greeks, it was like this idea of God is the ultimate source of being, and it's all about like substances. If that makes any sense, it is a little abstract. So you have guys like Plato coming up with this theory that there's a perfect realm, and there's no real cause for this. Okay. Fast forward to the Christian era, or I'm sorry, the medieval era, where all of a sudden everything depends on God. Okay, God as a kind of monotheistic thing, creating categories of sin and salvation, but everything goes through God, right? Okay, then you fast forward through more centuries and you get to this rationalistic period where all of a sudden, with Descartes being the main guy, is kind of the birth of science and the objectivity, the whole subject-object division. And all of a sudden, God is less important than like figuring things out. That makes sense so far? Like three separate kind of ways of existing that are dominant. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a philosopher
so far
or historian,
so good, right?
But yep.
But the point being is like the world feels a certain way under these three categories. Okay, fast forward a little bit, and a big thinker comes along, Nietzsche, and he basically says death of God is a thing now. And all of a sudden he's saying what that means is not a claim against God itself, but all of a sudden it's this feeling that people are losing their sense of what gives their lives meaning, that the whole science enlightenment project is just no longer enough for people to kind of go about their day and not feel like something important has been lost. Okay, so all of a sudden what takes place of call of rationality is this question of values from Nietzsche's perspective, which is to say that God is no longer providing these values. It's up to humans to do it. What's the big problem? Science itself has nothing to say about where values come from. And this is easy to understand when we think about, okay, it's possible to make an atomic bomb, but should we make an atomic bomb? Right? Scientists themselves all of a sudden get quiet about these questions. They know how, but you know, a dolphin can't make an atomic bomb. A dolphin doesn't have this capacity to say, nah, that's a bad analogy, actually, the dolphin one. It's humans, basically, in this case, that decide, ought we do something or ought we not do something, okay? All of this, so that's the fourth era. But now all of a sudden we find ourselves, and this is Heidegger's main point, since Nietzsche, in this technological era. In the technological era, everything is seen as a resource to be optimized. Everything, so let's start small. By everything, I mean things like nature, things like forests, go from, call it forests and rivers, go from, you know, ways of like being habitats and places to find shelter and like have, you know, do things in. All of a sudden, forests are translated into like lumber mills. That makes sense, right? Like all of a sudden you start quantifying trees and you start creating machinery to chop down the trees because they're no longer like forests as a whole and they're resources to be optimized.
And is like Heidegger specifically talking there, like critiquing the modern technological society and the fact that we're abusing these resources and like destroying the planet? Or is he saying he's not interested in that? He's just more observing, like, this is where we are.
This is exactly where it's tricky. Many people misread him because it's easy to misread him as we just got to go back to the old ways, right? We just have to go back to a pre-technological society. That's not what he's saying. He's saying in this large mode of existence, again, think Greek and medieval, we are the kinds of beings now today where technologies are dominant form of seeing things. And in this form, the default setting is to optimize and produce. The devil in the details, though, is that we do this to ourselves too. So it's not just about lumber, right? It's also that human beings become resources to be optimized and made more efficient. And this is where I think this is why I wanted to talk about this, because the best example I could offer is we have things called human resource departments. In our current world, pre-AI, this is where I think I'm heading. Everything is about making factories, I suppose, better. This is where globalization comes into play, right? Okay, where are our human resources cheapest and most accessible? But in those extreme cases, right, as we know, the people who make our iPhones in China, they have, they installed a bunch of nets around the factory so people don't kill themselves. Why would people kill themselves? Because if all you're doing every day with your human life is making things, but you yourself are a product of the factory, then there is no meaning there, right? And human beings are meaning-making creatures. So that's why there's a bit of tragedy involved. Now, Heidegger's point is not, again, to go back to some pre-technological society. That's impossible. But it is to bring an awareness to what it means to exist if you see everything as a resource. Now, religion used to play this role, right? It used to give us meaning outside of resources, myths, stories, stuff like that, right? But that kind of went away with the previous era. So what's the upshot here? I have this sense when I was listening to the All In podcast guys talking about AI that they're still only seeing one possibility, which is resource management, so to speak. That it's just kind of an acceleration of that stuff. Just more, what was the term they used? The return on invested capital, right? That some companies now have a situation where each employee is bringing in that much more revenue per employee because it's a bunch of work is being outsourced to the AI machine, right? So they're seeing it. One argument is that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think they were making a slightly different point that if as we start to use AI optimization, we drive down, like we improve the margins of certain companies. Like companies say have $1 billion worth of infrastructure and factories and whatever they have. Maybe they got like another $1 billion worth of people, and they can generate maybe, I don't know, $3 billion worth of output, and that's like their margin, if that sort of very loosely makes sense. I think the point the guys were making there was as we start to use AI, we'll drive efficiencies in like the hardware and in the people because of these incredible capabilities, and we'll be able to generate even more with the same. So naturally, like companies' return on invested capital or their margin is going to improve. And in a world where your margin's improving, like you're making more money for like the money you stick in, then you're incentivized to spend even more because you're no longer in this like really low margin business. Suddenly you're now in like a healthy margin business where it makes sense to like pump in a ton more capital.
So that makes sense. And this is why this is exactly the moment I think this philosophical frame comes into play for me in a way that I can't actually predict. I mean, I don't think anyone can, because these are eras that last like centuries, but it feels to me we're at the very start of some kind of limit showing up. Like what happens when you hit a limit of efficiency or productivity? such that human beings now it's no longer, you can't like go faster, you can't do better, you can't have even more ROIC. It's not about that anymore. And I think somehow people, this question of is AI, is this a doom or gloom scenario? We need to start considering, in some sense, what happens when people are no longer seen as resources, which is something that we have not thought about since, I guess, the 1800s, with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And I'm saying, this is a very open-ended question, by the way. I can't possibly have a fully formed, intelligent thesis about this because it's still non-existent. But as an investor, I know I'm most profitable when I could smell some fundamental shift and get there early. So outside of companies becoming more efficient, is there a way to invest? Is there a way of framing this current moment as something like beyond companies making more of stuff faster? And the only thing I could kind of hang my head on is some return to putting humanity or human beings first as non-resources.
It's a bit of a, I agree with you, but it's a kind of different shift as a layman, but trying to sort of lean into the framework and like the journey of society that you set out there. We were previously in this kind of agricultural, like manufacturing era where people did kind of everything. You were toiling in the fields and like, like mining rocks and doing stuff. And if you didn't do stuff, nothing happened. And then we transitioned into this era we're in now where like everything gets done through a combination of people and technology. And in some industries, like technology is dominant and people oversee and they have like a lighter role. And in some industries, people are very much part of the process and technology augments them. And so we're in this phase where you're describing like people as a resource. If we go into this, like, it's not, well, I suppose in some ways it's like technological, but it's like, maybe let's call it like a world of superabundance, perhaps, where, right. So suddenly we're getting loads of stuff done and we don't need the people. Like previously we had only the people. Then now we're in this like people and technology. Then we're moving into this world where we only need the technology. And so people are no longer a resource because they're no longer
That's exactly
relevant.
what I'm saying. That's exactly my point. The technology, all of a sudden, let's call it, becomes fundamentally embedded. It's no longer the point, so to speak, or we've outsourced the technology. But for people to no longer be resources or think of themselves as resources will be such a paradigm shift of literally epical proportions that I think from an investor standpoint, if we could somehow sniff out what it would mean to invest in something where well-being of humanity is like the focus as opposed to optimization of humanity, then we would be looking in a particular corner that nobody else is looking. I really can't tell you what that could concretely look like. The only best guess is something like, and it's actually kind of a self-fulfilling loop. Why am I in this moment interested in philosophy and therapy loosely defined? It's because I'm doubling down in the moment of resources on something that can't be outsourced, like the human heart, call it, like the existential angst that comes with feeling you're not needed. That's the only place left where I feel technology or the technological frame can't touch us. So I don't know. The summary for me here is, I think the All In podcast guys, I think Sachs said it. You can't predict this kind of stuff. The people that are trying to predict the end game are, they're sensationalists because we just don't know how it's going to end. There are a bunch of risks on the table you have to take seriously, the existential stuff / the risk of China getting there first from our perspective. But that kind of stuff, I think, we could debate till we're blue in the face, and we won't know how it shapes up until it actually, until we could see it. But
I think we can take a stab at this. I'd like to take a stab at it because I've been thinking about this for some time. Like, there are definitely pros and cons to this world we're moving into, and there's no way to reverse our trajectory. Like, this is the way we are going now, and if we try and put in place like regulation and slow things down, as you say, like some other country or some other, unregulated company will just do it anyway. Right. And one of the serious downsides is this is probably inevitably going to drive a much bigger chasm between the haves and the have-nots. And I somewhat optimistically see myself as being like a beneficiary of this stuff. And I think anybody who, like, if you're in a job or you're in like a place in the world where you kind of think about stuff and you're like a creator. Like I took stupid example, but like I took a year off of work in 2020. I planned to travel the world, have adventures. COVID kicked my plans in the ass. So I'm like, oh, I got all this time. What shall I do? And, I had enough money in the bank to not have to work for that year, but I suddenly had nothing to do. So I had no direction. So I just invented something. I created the Telescope Investing podcast with my buddy Albert. We did that, and then that's turned into like the main trajectory of my life. And now here we are on episode 84, 85 of Wall Street Wildlife, like 2 podcasts later. If you have a creator mindset in a world where like the shackles are off and you don't have to do stuff, you will come up with something and you will just do stuff for the intrinsic value of it. And in a post-scarcity society where we have like superabundance of energy and everything and resources and like limitless opportunities, people who are motivated will find something useful to do. They'll find a purpose. But I fear for, now I'd like just sort of forgive my poor language, right? But like the demotivated or people who aren't like self-starters and people who are in roles where maybe you just kind of show up and you do like a production line style job today. And what are you going to do when that production line job doesn't exist? And so I'm going to apologize to 2 industries here, but I think they're 2 interesting industries where we can go down the rabbit hole a little bit and we can start to debate what might the individuals in those jobs do today. So apologies to taxi and truck drivers and waiters and waitresses, but I do think these are like interesting roles where I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands, millions of highly creative, motivated individuals in those kind of jobs today. But I also think there's probably a lot of folk who just show up and they do their job and then they draw their paycheck and then they go spend it in the bar at night. Like, is that unfair a characterization?
No, I'll restate that as I think we already see in our current society what I call the narcotization of human beings, like the entertainment industry. TikTok, I think, is a most apt example for the younger generation. I mean, actually look around societally at any public square, most people are narcoticizing themselves with the gadgets. So I think you're right, but now we're sounding like I think we're right to say that many people will be in trouble, like existentially. I'm calling this an existential problem because drugs exist in order to numb, right? In order to take away fear of this kind of, like what you're pointing out, fear of there being no ground and nobody telling you what you ought to do with your life. This superabundance, call it massive shift that's clearly coming, will put people exactly in these crosshairs. That is why I'm trying to, and I'm doing such a poor job, articulate that there must be a way to invest and invest largely, very broadly speaking, in a way to almost like preemptively catch or set up this large net for people who inevitably will find themselves not knowing what to do. And I don't think it has to do with, I don't know. I'm trying to say the blame is not on call it people's character. It has to do more with like the societal structures that people through fate find themselves in, mostly through education models, so to speak, right? If the education model turns you into a passive uh, industrial zombie and you're fine as long as somebody tells you what to do next, then you just go and do the next thing, right? But as an educator, I find that's a bad place to be in as a person when you're relying on somebody to tell you what to do next. So when the robots take all those jobs, we are going to find ourselves in this place with a bunch of, call it, perfectly capable but directionless zombies, for lack of a better term. So what can we as a society and literally investors invest in now, seeing that this is the cliff that's coming? I'm right now just point blank saying one answer is philosophy itself slash education and slash art, creativity, craftsmanship. And can we build products? Can we build a way of being that makes people more comfortable in this kind of like uncomfortable moment?
I agree, right? And if you've like if everyone has like a universal basic income, and like we're going to have to transition to some version of that in the future just for society to function, and you can find meaning and purpose in being an educator or being educated, right? Just learning about the world. If that intellectual stimulation is the thing that does it for you, like you said to me at the top of the podcast, hey, teach me to ride a motorbike. Like everybody has random ass skills, and you could create like a real purpose in life just in sharing those skills and those stories. And you wouldn't even have to be paid a lot of money to do that because you have like your UBI safety net in place. I think we are talking here about, if we get this right from a governance perspective, we're not talking about like sustenance and the ability to like live. We're talking about like meaning and a sense of purpose, feeling like you're doing something. And so, yeah, like be a teacher or just enjoy the joy of learning, right? You could create purpose from that. But if that just doesn't do it for you, and this is why I pointed at, let's take one of my examples. And again, I'm apologizing to wait staff around the world, right? But if you know your words, if you're like an intellectual zombie, but you still want, you're a human being who has feelings and you need like a purpose in life. Like if you're in those kind of roles, I think you have a certain skill set, which is highly applicable in the future. And I just tried to think of one or two small examples. Like the hospitality industry isn't going to go away. Like in this, it's the example we all kind of point at, like chess, right? Computers play chess so much better than humans do, but still there's real joy and interest in watching humans face off against each other across a chessboard. And it's not the same, watching like a robot football team versus like a human football team or whatever kind of emotional or physical endeavor. There's something special in seeing like humans participate in this thing as opposed to it doesn't make sense for everything to get automated. And I think hospitality and care and maybe like sales type roles, like where the job is best done human to human, there could be a proliferation of those kind of roles. And if you were like a great front of house in a restaurant, then you're going to be a great front of house as like a hospitality kind of role representing some business. Maybe the business is like this techno monster machine with like AI, but still it wants like a squishy, fleshy cool human being to kind of sell its services. And so there's a role for you there. Human care is probably the last thing that's going to get automated away. Maybe there's more dignity in having like a machine kind of wipe your ass, but you still don't want, like, you're going to want a human to like hold your hand and talk to you and, look after our elders or look after those of us who have like disabilities or infirm, or even just kind of create, I don't know, like commune kind of environments. I'm kind of shooting from the hip now in terms of what these roles will actually look like. But I intuitively feel there's definitely a role in the world for people who have just good people skills. And I picked on that example as waiters and waitresses because they are people who have good people skills, because that's what they do every day. And I've got another example around truck drivers, which I think I can land the plane on as well. But let me get your view on that one first.
My view of truck drivers.
Oh, do you sort of buy? Do you buy that? Like, if education isn't your thing and you need to be told what to do, like, this is the huge mass of people who we have to worry about, because there's a subset of us who will just figure it out and we'll just go and do something and we'll be very happy. We've been set free by this AI revolution, as opposed to being like suppressed by it. But for the large number of people around the world who aren't going to feel like they're set free, they're going to feel like they've been like replaced. What do they do? Now, do you buy my argument that here's one example of a particular industry and how that industry can redeploy and play like an important role in the future society?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody will need to face this question. I don't think there are very few industries, right, that are free from exactly this problem. You're absolutely right. I mean, we're talking about scales that are unprecedented. I mean, there will be hundreds of millions of people that need to find what to do with themselves. You know what I keep coming back to as we talk about this? You just recently visited Amazon, an actual Amazon warehouse, right? And you could see that that's only going to keep getting better, faster, more efficient, right? Education is still operating under the old model of, desks and seats and the industrial model. That's obviously on its way out. I mean, the universities are dying because of AI. I mean, it's so obvious, right? Everybody in the education sphere is like scrambling to figure out, do we let students use AI? Do we not? How could we not? I mean, it's like watching a dinosaur on its last legs. I kind of have this sense, like, go back to our fundamental question, how do we invest in what's about to happen? It seems like we need to completely reinvest in education, like create like the Amazon factory of education somehow. And I know that sounds weird, but you remember for-profit schools, like profit colleges? They were once an investable thing, like diploma mills, so to speak. And some people, I'm sure, made money on it. Obviously, it's going to be not like that, almost the opposite of that. But somehow there's going to be people who figure out how to prioritize well-being and then use the technology to hit that well-being. That's the meta frame I'm addressing here. And in a weird way, the stock safari pick that I want to talk about kind of hints a little bit at the reprioritization of this stuff. So, but it's not yet. Taxi drivers and wait staff and probably many other white-collar workers are going to be in the same exact boat. So I don't think it's a hierarchical thing.
Oh, totally. Like, this is coming for all of us. Like, I generated like an AI podcast a couple of weeks ago to help me understand a topic, right? But I do think people are still going to want to listen to humans and get a human perspective, even though you might get a much more intelligent, nuanced answer by listening to like an LLM give you like an AI podcast on the same topic.
I don't know if I've told you. I mean, you've sat in on one of my classes, but I've been thinking like this for years now, thinking and teaching like this for years now. I don't use grades in my classrooms, which to most of my students is shocking because they're only motivated by the kind of, think about it, like, what do I have to do to get the A? But once I take that away from them, they're left scrambling, thinking, what do I actually have to do? If I'm not being, if I'm not jumping through hoops, I actually have to learn to do what? Well, learn to, think about the topics that I teach, but fundamentally it's also learn how to just do something for the sake of doing that thing, like a craftsman would do. Ride a motorbike or have a deep relationship with somebody, not in order to extricate their value or treat them as a means to an end, but for the sake of just doing that thing. So it's very weird. I know we're talking very high level stuff, but at some point efficiency and productivity just won't be the name of the game again. And that kind of existentially makes it seem like, well, will investing still be a thing? It is a kind of weird question to do, since investing up to now has been measured by productivity and all these weird, KIPs that you can measure and maximize and do all that. Well, I don't know how long away we are from most companies being run by 3 employees with all the robots doing everything else. And, side note, one of the main points of disagreement on the All In podcast was, I think it was Sachs and Friedberg, or no, Jason was talking about, like, well, what happens to managers? Are managers themselves being kicked out? And I think one of the guys was saying, no, managers are fine. And the other one was saying, no, actually, companies are already getting rid of their Slack channels and or doing whatever. So fast forward 5 years from now, how many employees are there per company, even successful ones, right? And then you have all this capital that's being sort of freed up, which I think Friedberg was saying, well, that creates deflationary measures, because all of a sudden things get a lot cheaper because you don't have to pay so many people. But then again, our world, what do you invest in? How do you even start thinking about things when all these metrics are kind of like, I don't even know how to say this. The metrics themselves get skewed because I don't know, revenue per employee is so high, but all of a sudden you have everybody is no jobs are no longer available. I don't know how to frame it, right? The UBI stuff comes in here very quickly.
I think it's positive for investors, right? Like, what is investing really? It's taking capital from one place and giving it to another place, which hopefully generates more capital, and then it kind of flows back into the system. In a world where the average company has 2 or 3 employees, not 200 or 300 employees, there will be like hundreds of times like the number of companies. There'll be, every little niche, right? People can create like a fantastic, healthy business in some tiny little niche, manufacturing some, very bespoke jewelry or a very bespoke kind of podcast, whatever it might be. And there'll just be this proliferation of highly targeted businesses which are doing like valuable things, generating economic value. And there'll still need capital, right? There'll still be a need for investors to fund capital to the best of those companies. There'll still be like the AI haves and have-nots. You'll have like the giants, like the Metas and the Googles and the Amazons are just going to get bigger and bigger and more dominant. But underneath them, we'll have thousands of times the number of little companies using their services to deliver something that has value.
Right. As you were talking, I was briefly letting myself enter a kind of utopian space where it's obvious universal basic income is a foundation, and most people therefore spend the majority of their hours not as laborers, not as resources to be maximized, not within HR departments, not as managers, but basically capital allocators. That actually weirdly sounds, I know it sounds utopian, and like Marx would probably roll over in his grave to think that there's an alternate way of existing that's outside of people being alienated from their jobs. But if in fact the alienation goes gets put onto the robots because they can't feel, they're not feeling the alienation. So then therefore the rest of us become investors by default. Like one of the things we have to do as a job, quote unquote, is to figure out which next cool little project we should invest in because we can't do the job ourselves, or become artists. So that's actually, if I may summarize briefly, maybe that's what we just talked ourselves into: a world in which most people become craftsmen slash artisans of a particular skill. They have to become relationally intelligent, and they have to become much better investors because they have all this time in the world and capital still makes the world run. So you could still become more or less well off, relatively speaking, in an abundant society by becoming more sensitive to the kinds of companies that are being created by investing wisely, I suppose. That's a weird world.
Yeah, that's a good optimistic view, I think. Like there is still a pessimistic outcome, which may not even be like mass unemployment, maybe leaning on your zombie comment. Like maybe the worst possible outcome is just mass unengagement. People just lose interest. They feel no sense of purpose. And then, they get their UBI, they buy their like food basics, and they spend their life like glued to TikTok or whatever future iteration of highly targeted, personalized social media.
Which,
like,
by the way, I
entertainment
don't think you
robots.
know this, but I know your stance on reading, but I don't know if I've told you explicitly, Luke. My dissertation was on this very problem in many ways. The author that I wrote about, David Foster Wallace, in 1995 and 96, his masterpiece is called Infinite Jest. It's a sort of sci-fi novel that imagines what society is like when everybody is entertained to death. And in there is like a plot point is that there's this something called the entertainment. He literally called it the entertainment, which is a copy of a tape that once you put it on, it's so addictive that you will actually do nothing else but watch it and die. So terrorists get their hands on this thing, right? But that was in 1995. That was at the very beginning that was when the internet was just starting to kind of percolate. So he, as a writer, saw this and saw that this is a form of drugs, because the other half of the book takes place in halfway houses dealing with addicts who can't stop doing the thing. So it's the one and the same thing point, right? You're absolutely right that in the age of TikTok, this is the problem we'll have to figure out as a society. Now, I'm only trying to add to this a slightly positive spin that the way we solve this problem is in many ways philosophically, by asking the question, what does it mean to exist? And beyond the technological way of existing is this AI showing us a new thing is starting to be born. We just don't know, how it's going to unfold.
It's a definite danger. I think I sent you a post on X from Andrej Karpathy. So if you don't know like who the name is, he was previously director of AI at Tesla and also one of the founders of OpenAI, but left under a bit of a kind of cloud. I think he didn't quite see eye to eye with the rest of the company. But he posted the other day about VO3, which is Google Alphabet's new video generation model, which is incredible. Like, go check out some of the examples, and like incredible quality video now with audio, and it's really engaging. And so like the tools available to creators are now so fantastic. Like this is a great opportunity because video is a fantastic way of learning. This is the point that Karpathy was trying to make. Like watching a highly targeted video specifically built for you in real time to teach you a specific thing you're trying to do. That's a great way of ingesting information. But at the same time, the way the internet and commerce works is it's like monetizing your attention. And the example he gave was like, if you have a video that's specifically made to engage you personally, and maybe you're like measuring I know, like pupil dilation and heart rate and stuff. Like you've got like a direct, because you can probably do that through the camera quite effectively. You've got a direct way of seeing how to optimize the video in the perfect way to capture like me, which will be, and the video you get will be different because that will be optimized to capture your attention. I guess that is the entertainment. That's like the thing that we cannot turn off because it's been so precisely optimized by this super intelligence to kind of
I remember
us.
it was he said himself that he already saw the danger in TikTok like years ago, right? I mean, for this very reason, in that this stuff is like TikTok on steroids, that it might be like an existential threat of the kind as a nuclear bomb for us if we really can't figure out an alternate way of understanding the world and what existence is. It's wild. So yeah, we've pontificated quite a bit, but I think that's a necessary detour to take, because I don't know, when there's this natural endpoint of efficiency, opportunity also shows up. So I just want our listeners to be, at least have this feeling that there are multiple worlds waiting to be born, and it's going to look very different from the one we're currently exiting.
Cool. Very good. All right. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not all doom and gloom. I think there are definitely good outcomes
here. A good outcome with a stock I recently researched. Can I tell you about it? Okay. One of our Patreon members said, take a look at Oscar Health, stock ticker OSCR. This is a tech-first insurance platform. It was co-founded by a tech guy, Mario Scossler, I think, who doesn't himself like insurance. So he founded this tech platform. Well, backtrack. Why doesn't he like insurance? Because he feels like they're all trying to root against you and get your money, right? Hard to use, hard to understand. They only show up really when they want to collect money from you, right? So Oscar's trying to change that, flip it around. Their mission is to make a healthier life accessible and affordable for all. They're like the GPS for your healthcare journey, helping you find the right doctor, giving you free virtual care, and making the whole thing actually work. Why? Because if you're healthier, they have to pay less as an insurance company. So if you're healthier and you're making fewer claims, they pay less, their costs drop, they then reduce premiums, they increase their membership, and then it's a virtual cycle. Okay? So they're not just selling insurance, they're kind of selling integrated healthcare platform driven by tech and AI and all the things we were talking about. If they can pull this off, it's a game changer. Now, let me pull back the curtain on my research for my journey on this. As soon as I started looking into this, I was cursing our Patreon's name, because immediately all of a sudden in this world of acronyms and insurance, you know how much I love stupid jargon acronyms, but insurance in the healthcare world, and I do not trust any of it, nor am I an expert in this field. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to recommend this thing, just because I'm out of my depth and I'm out of my comfort zone. But something shifted kind of halfway through my research, I would say. What shifted is that I generally think this is like a good guy kind of company. You know what I mean by that when I say that? Like, there's some investment cases where you kind of feel like this is headed by and for people to legitimately solve a problem that most people have. I guess that's most businesses, but that there is this sense, like in healthcare industry / pharmaceutical company, like that the rich get richer and everybody kind of gets screwed because the profit takes precedence over everything. It legitimately feels to me like these guys are saying, okay, healthcare insurance is one of these unfair environments that people kind of have to do the best they can given a whole bunch of problems, but there's only so many options. And what if we kind of change that? What if we change that? So this is where the turning point for me was in this investment. What's it called? What's the word I'm trying to? The deep dive, the semi deep dive I went on. They call it total cost of care strategy. Where this is what it looks like. You get an app, and on this app, you kind of get assigned a virtual healthcare, call it nurse/concierge, right? They tell you, okay, you communicate to them your problem, and you have a bunch of different options, and they say, oh, within your network, we think the best doctor with the best ratings for your issue is so-and-so. So they're kind of like guiding you through. It's not like you're lost in a netherworld of infinite possibilities and with some insurance claim number at the very end of it. It's like a humane thing. This is what we were talking about earlier, right? Now, the proof is in the pudding. These guys have went from 40 million members back in, I'm sorry, not 40 million, 40,000 members, because they're starting from scratch. These guys built this platform from scratch, from 40,000 to 2 million members currently. Now, the United States has 300 million people, but not all of them are insurance eligible. But anyway, I'm sorry, they have 2 million. Did I say 2 million members? They went from 40,000 to 2 million.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not nothing. So their finances have grown considerably since then. They are now net profitable. So they're doing something quite right. At this moment, they're financially strong. That's a whole nother subsection. We now know that these guys, by virtue of having 2 million members with a high net promoter score, are doing something better than the kind of what's it called, instantiated big health insurance providers. We already know that. Their finances are really, really strong. $3 billion in cash, 80% revenue growth, 5-year CAGR, and recently net income positive, as I said. So to me, all of a sudden, I'm actually excited about this investment. I'm like, wait a second, you're telling me these guys actually want to make you healthier because it's better for their business model? So they actually not just want to make you healthier, but they're going to work with you to make you as healthy as you can by actually holding your hand through all of the, intricate healthcare process. Cool. That feels really, really good to me. And they're growing like banshees, and they're financially strong. Like, yeah, I'll deal with the jargon and I'll deal with whatever. And these guys are, tech savvy, tech bros, built this from scratch. I'm all in, right? But there's a big but here. How are they doing all this? Well, they are actually in a very, I don't know if it's a tiny sliver, but they could only offer these services to 2 groups of people. Essentially, anybody under the Affordable Care Act, so basically Obamacare, because the government subsidizes people to get their own insurance. That's to whom it's available. And this product is also available to what's known as ICHRA, people under the Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement, which is basically the thing that small and medium-sized businesses can offer to individuals to basically choose their own healthcare product. Make sense?
Yep, sounds good. And it also sounds good, like in a world where like the CEO of like medical insurance companies are getting murdered on the streets. Like that is how disappointed, shall we say, that customers are with their healthcare insurance.
Right.
So
okay.
These guys are good guys.
All of which is to say, right now, the TAM for people who either can just pick their own insurance under Obamacare, or because their own small or medium-sized business basically pays them to pick their own healthcare because it's cheaper to do it that way, that is 96 million people. So currently they have 2 million members. Their whole pie is 96 million. So in theory, Luke, this company has ways to go, and they're doing something people already like. So I love it. I love it. However, there's a major, I don't know if it's an existential risk exactly, but in this current moment, there is the risk that the government repeals the subsidies provided by the government to all the people available to basically pick their own insurance. If that happens, this stock and this company has a severe crisis on its hands. Because they're so strongly, because they have a strong cash balance and there's a bunch of like future potentialities, I won't even get into all of that. It's not like the stock would go to zero like a biotech, that gets a rejection from the FDA. But in this particular moment, under the Trump administration, knowing that they're gunning for some sort of ACA reform, I kind of think that this is sort of a less of an investment than a gamble on whether or not the United States government will keep things as they are or actually like root out a bunch of the money that is making this kind of thing possible. If the U.S. government basically keeps things status quo or actually supports further subsidies, then this is one of the more exciting new investments that I've kind of had cross my windshield stock screening process in a little while. But I cannot invest in it.
So it's like it's way outside your usual wheelhouse. Like you normally get excited by companies like putting stuff into orbit or companies building like incredible batteries. Like you're a technology guy, and here you are supporting some boring old.
I know it's weird, but okay. So maybe to tie the knot of what we were talking about this whole episode, it's because it seems like they're putting humanity's well-being first, and then they're saying, okay, how do we beat these health insurance companies at their own game? We're just going to do it by making a better technological platform that has a human at the center rather than, the labyrinth halls of the healthcare industry. Strong financials, strong platform, strong ratings. People love this thing. Existential risk in terms of the government subsidies. And so the best I could say for our listeners is you might want to take out, if this kind of thing excites you, at most a 1% position, treat it like a lottery and see what happens with the government's take on healthcare subsidies.
All right, very good. Thanks for walking us through that fun Safari stock. I have a Safari short this week. I'm jumping into the void you left because you, like way back, I think it was episode 61, so like 5 or 6 months ago, we both looked at a quantum computing company each. You looked at QUBT, which I think is Quantum Computing Inc., which is like the beverage company turned quantum computer company, like I buy it, total BS. I looked at Rigetti, who are a bit more legit, but you've thrown in the towel on your QUBT short. I've picked up the baton and I now own a bunch of puts on Rigetti. And I'm not going to go into detail as to why. I just think this whole sector is hot air and fluff. These guys do have a bit of technology. They are they're not just like a beverage company with a couple of like scientists on board. They are building quantum computings using like superconducting style technology. And their goal is to build like big quantum systems and sell through the cloud, like provide like quantum capacity. So even the business model kind of makes sense. But I think the thing that makes me like face into how much of a bubble this sector is right now is interesting conversation we had on the 7 Investing Discord just a few days ago. It kind of helped catalyze it. Someone highlighted, oh, this is like 3D printing like back in the whenever it was. And you and I think we both lost our shirts on 3D printing. This is way worse than 3D printing ever was, because the challenges, like it's like the hype curve, the Gartner hype curve, right? You know, investors get excited about a new technology and it gets like pumped to the moon, and then you pass down into like the trough of disillusionment and you realize actually it's going to be a long journey before we can really monetize this stuff. And then slowly you climb the plateau of productivity, which is where you really start to generate actual economic value. Like 3D printing went through that whole cycle, but way back in the mid 2000s, the challenges, like 3D printing was real. We had the technology. It was an engineering problem and a product market fit problem. Quantum computing is both of those things, but it's also a freaking almost, you know, we don't know the way forward. Like significant inventions are needed. It's a major scientific problem. And you have these like trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar companies like Alphabet pursuing this, and they haven't figured it out yet. Rigetti, QUBT, all the other quantum shitcodes, they are not going to solve this problem. I mean, just look at the trajectory of the market cap. This is just typical of all of these companies. Over the last 6 to 9 months, they all came out of nowhere from being like $100 million companies or thereabouts to, like at its peak, Rigetti was nearly a $6 billion company. It's currently about a $3.5 billion valuation. They have no revenue at all, right? It's de minimis, a couple of $1 million. I think your one even had like tens of thousands of dollars of
tens
revenue.
of thousands.
Like a joke.
I think like $40,000.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's cool, right? That's cool beans if it's like a company at super early stage, pre-product. That makes sense. These guys are definitely pre-product. But this is like a 10 plus year journey before they could possibly have a product. Like there are just too many hurdles to cross. And they're on a burn. Like so we can see on this chart from FinChat, which we love, finchat.io, fantastic platform. If you want to get a nice discount, finchat.io/wildlife for our promotional pricing. Like you can see they've got $200 million in the bank. Like, where do you think they're getting that money? They're getting it because they are diluting the wazoo out of shareholders. And as they continue to burn money, they're going to keep diluting shareholders. This bubble is going to pop. So I now own 7 contracts, I think, of January 2027 puts. And I need the stock price to dump materially. Like it's currently $3.5 billion valuation. It needs to get to sub $1 billion for my bet to make sense. But anyway, this is like an entertainment position for me. I bought just like a fun amount of stock because I want to carry the banner on this podcast because you fell by the wayside. I'm going to pick up the flag and continue to chant on the social medias.
Excellent. I'm glad you picked up the courage where I ran scared, and I'm glad you used the January 27s, because this is what I learned from my journey. I kind of pretty much timed it nearly as well as you could time it, but because the premiums were so high on the puts, I made out with, I think cumulatively, what was it, $55 loss on the trade, because I needed my shares to actually drop back to like a dollar level, but they stayed at the 4 and then went back up. Here's the caveat. Here's why it's clear that this is what you were saying is true. Well, not clear. I'd say highly, highly, highly probable as being true. But in some sectors of a market like this, this is like the crypto version of investing. There's people in propping up the stock price, I would call artificially, because they've taken their own bets and positions based on momentum and stuff. And because it's so disjointed from the fundamentals, you could wait potentially a long time for, call it the truth, to win out. So my own puts, I think I took like a 6-month window or something like that, or 4-month window, and that's just not enough time. And I hope, yours pay off before, 2027.
I love that. It's like usually around my birthday time when most of like these long dated options expire. So like I get like a birthday gift, either a kick in the ass or like a little extra present. So that'll be in like a year and a half's time. Unfortunately, my birthday gift for January 2026 is like losing a ton of cash
Oh,
on
hey,
Coherus
that
Biosciences, which you definitely told
that's
me
not over
do not
yet.
tell me.
That's not over yet. You know, though, another reason why the puts are smart, it's just more insurance for a nasty stock downturn. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
seriously, it's no, in some ways like buying a little bit of insurance. In this case, a quack of a investing idea, but maybe.
Yeah. Like if the market goes down, it's like the dumb stuff is going to go down much more
Well, not
than the really
necessarily.
robust
See,
stuff.
that's what I'm saying. You're thinking like an intelligent investor who thinks about fundamentals. This stuff is so divorced from that it might not be the case. But usually,
Okay.
right, if there's a nasty downturn, most things get sold. So you'll get paid regardless of whether it's quality or not or nonsense.
All right. How are we doing for time, Krzysztof? Because I sold something and you bought something. Do we want to pick that up or should we save
Let's
those
save it for a future
episode?
episode. I think we've talked quite a bit.
We have indeed. Well, if you want to hear why I sold Remitly and why Krzysztof bought EOS, check back with us in 2 weeks' time. Because next week we got a pretty exciting, high-profile guest from the world of US finance
Yes,
joining us.
or if you want to know about these moves today, head over to our patreon.com/Wall Street Wildlife, and our trade channel has all the goods and thinking behind why we did the thing that we did.
Exactly. If you liked the stock investing tool that we looked at for both of our stocks, that was FinChat. Go check out finchat.io/wildlife for a excellent discount off an annual plan.
Am I supposed to say? is this where I say? Are you ready to become a beast of an investor?
Your journey starts here.
A reminder that the people on this program may hold positions in the companies that are mentioned. Buying and selling stock carries financial risk, which could include loss of capital. The views in this program should not be taken as personalized advice. Before acting on any of the information provided, listeners are encouraged to consult a financial or tax professional.